Welcome, everybody, to Kraken Cast Podcast. It is a podcast where we sit down, discuss a variety of topics with various creatives, from Twitch streamers to game devs and everything in between. Today, we're joined by Twitch streamer Nordenheim. Nordenheim has a focus on Elder Scrolls Online content, really getting into the housing, but a lot of other aspects as well. In addition to that, Nordenheim has been branching out as a content creator recently, checking out Skyrim for the first time. They're a very enjoyable, very enthusiastic content creator, so we're excited to have Nordenheim here today. In fact, I am blessed because I met Nordenheim as a member of my community here, and then at some point they decided to start streaming, so I've been able to see their streaming journey from the start to where it is now, which is really awesome. So without further ado, welcome to Krakencast Nordenheim. Happy to have you here today.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. It's kind of surreal considering literally 6 months ago I was watching these on the flip side.
That's fair. We were already doing the podcast back when you were watching, so that's awesome. So yeah, just to kind of kick things off, or just kind of get into it a little bit. Since this is something where you just started watching and then decided to get into streaming, before we talk about why you decided to go live, why don't we talk about discovering Twitch? Because I think you mentioned you were pretty new when you started watching my channel and some others to even being a viewer of Twitch.
Yeah, I actually, I'm not even totally sure how I discovered Twitch, to be honest. It was mainly, I think, the Blackwood preview event. When all the hype was happening, and I think the first stream that I actually ever tuned into was Nephus, when they were giving away a copy of Blackwoods. And I'm not going to lie, I've entered a lot of giveaways. That definitely was a lure at the beginning. But then I just found this huge sense of community, and I got kind of, I guess, I don't know, I just felt really welcomed, you know?
Well, I mean, the way ESO works is the first hit is free, very similar to drug dealers that you might see on a TV show. You know, we do the giveaways, we give you copies of Blackwood, get you some gold to get started, you know, because we know once you're playing, you're hooked. So that's, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The tactic worked 100%. Yeah. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker.
Awesome. And then, yeah, so you started watching Twitch. Obviously, there's an appeal from giveaways and stuff because, you know, the giveaways are a hook, right? They're a kind of a fish hook to get people to kind of come in, check out what's going on. And if they like what they see, sometimes they'll stick around. So, you know, watching, entering some giveaways, things like that. What, you know, you found ESO, found that sense of community. What made you, like, not just keep watching Twitch, but go, okay, I think I want to stream myself. I want to actually be on that side of the camera.
That's a good question. I mean, a big part of it was I was encouraged by a couple of really good friends. And the other part was just that I loved houses. I loved housing. I think everyone knows that now. And I wanted to share all of these amazing homes with people who maybe weren't aware that all of these places existed, you know? And I saw some incredible streamers like Stabity Doom, J Hart Ellis, Airy doing housing tours. And I just went, I want to do that. I want to share this. And so that's kind of what encouraged me.
That's awesome, because yeah, I know on the side of design you fell really hard once you got into ESO, into the housing. In fact, when we did our chopped housing contest, our big contest, you actually made it all the way to the grand finale of that contest. So
that was absolutely bonkers. The first ever contest that entered.
Yeah, for people who don't know, chopped housing is a housing contest that we do where people each round are given 6 items that are really nice items, but they don't really necessarily go together in a set of parameters that are a challenge. And then the winners of each round move on. And like I mentioned, Nordenheim actually got to the grand finale with like other amazing housing streamers. So before we get a little more, I want to talk a little more about Chop, just because on the upcoming season, we're branching out and you're going to be involved with that. But before we talk about that, let's talk a little more about housing. What is it about housing, making houses, seeing other people's creations with housing, that really makes that one of your prime focuses? I know you do a lot of other ESO content, but it's been one of the main, I would say, staples of your content. What is it about housing that makes it so kind of special to you?
I think, honestly, for me, it's the sheer creativity. I've always been very driven by creativity, right from childhood. If there's a creative hobby out there, I've probably given it a go. Anything from like knitting and sculpture to painting. But with housing, I found it was so freeform. You could literally do anything you wanted to in the housing system in ESO. And I was just in awe of all of this amazing work. And I think there's something also that's very special about knowing that when you go and tour a home, when you see someone's creation, they have spent time placing every single furnishing in that house, and just the amount of time and thought and energy that goes into these builds is really quite astounding.
Exactly. And that's something unique about housing in ESO. A lot of MMOs have really amazing housing, but ESO's editor being so freeform, you have people who take the house they're given as a canvas and decorate it as if it was their dream home. You have people who will reskin a house, and all of a sudden what was once a simple mud hut is now a cave. You have people who will make elaborate sculptures, and everything in between. There's just so many things that can happen, and you could give 10 people doing housing with the exact same items to work with, the exact same house to work with, a concept, and you would see 10 completely different things. So I think you're right. It's just like such just a creative endeavor, and it's you have the limitations of the amount of items that you have to work with and how many items you can use in a home, but it does have that freedom because you can do whatever you look at the canvas and can just create.
Absolutely. And in some ways, the limits actually inspire creativity, in the sense that if you've got a home that's only 200 slots, you end up having to really think carefully and using things very unconventionally to kind of create what you'd like to, because you can't just place down 1,000 individual pebbles because it's not going to work,
Right. And actually there's something, so back my background, I went to school for theater and film, mostly doing like set and lighting design and things like that. I've also done script writing and things like that in my past. And there's something about art, all forms of art, where when you have to create within limitations, like you said, it sparks different creativity. Because if you had access to every item, unlimited slots, unlimited everything, you could do meticulous things. It would be wonderful. I would love to have that. But the limitations also spark creativity. You can look at things like Star Wars, where the original Star Wars were created with all these like limitations of technology, limitations of budget, and obviously ended up coming out to be what it was. And I think the same can be said about housing, because it really is. I think the thing we keep alluding to is, and you've said it also outright, is it's an art form. ESO housing is uniquely its own form of art, unique to other types of art, but still very much the same as any art form, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And there's also this sense that you can kind of create your own world. Like, I've always been obsessed with the idea of like fantasy worlds involving kind of, I don't know, mythology, folklore, all these mythical creatures. And I wanted to create worlds where I felt like I was part of it, And I think housing presents like a unique opportunity to actually step into those worlds,
Yeah, I agree 100% that it creates a unique opportunity to step into those worlds and really just kind of show your vision of the world to others. For example, recently touring houses and doing a housing thing, somebody had entered a house that had an Easter egg hunt, and really did an Easter egg hunt in ESO in someone's house. But I've been in houses where people have made it look super modern and things like that. So it's like you said, it's a way to like create your world, but also share the world. And I think I want to talk a little bit about that sharing of worlds, because obviously as a streamer, we can share our worlds, we can share our creations. With contests, we can share our creations, but we also get to share other people's world, which is a lot of like the housing tours that you mentioned. J. Hart Ellis, huge inspiration to me as well, who does housing hikes. I think streaming creates a unique chance to show the world. Like, people into housing can post on forums or use EHT to find each other's houses, but with streaming, I feel like it's a chance for us as streamers to broadcast people's arts to people who might not otherwise see it, and let those people who created those worlds, their own worlds, like share those worlds with a bunch of people who might not have ever seen them before. Do you kind of feel the same way, or how do you feel about that?
No, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think to go one step further, part of what drew me into housing tours was actually YouTube videos by someone called Alara Northwind. And she made these incredible housing tours, but I kept wanting to ask questions about the houses that were being toured. And you can't really do that with a platform like YouTube. But with live streaming, it means that people can literally just go, wait, how did they do that? What did they put together? How have they made that? I've not seen that before. And you're uniquely placed to actually be able to kind of answer those questions and kind of, I guess, share the experience that others have,
Yeah, especially if they're in chat, you could ask questions directly in the community. I see it with fashion and housing all the time when somebody goes, oh, what shoulder was that they used on that outfit? Oh, how did you make that? Like you said, there's like the unique thing with watching a video, you can see amazing creations, and that's wonderful. But yeah, with streaming, you can actually ask questions and kind of delve more into it, and the community can interact with each other and learn from each other. I think learning is also obviously a huge part of this this housing side of the game.
Absolutely, 100%. And I'm always going to be for learning, having been a former teacher.
Very, very fair. So I want to roll back just a little bit, and we definitely will talk more about housing and more about ESO and things like that. But I want to talk a little bit about your approach. Obviously, you're an artist. You've done emotes for me, working on emotes for me. So you've done emotes for people. You have your own character design because you use an avatar instead of like a live cam. So I'm kind of curious about kind of your artistic background and, your initial artistic background, your teaching background that you just brought up, and things from your background that you've brought into streaming.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I've never really in terms of actual art education, I didn't really study it officially formally until I was like 16. We had art lessons, but I didn't really get kind of stuck in and absorbed in it until I was around 15, 16. And I started, as many do, with anime characters, with manga. And I just it just became something that drove me in my free time. I never pursued it professionally until last year. But really, it's just been majority self-taught with a little bit of school training when it comes to the art side of things.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really interesting.
But I've always been driven by art. It's something that it's one of my core passions, I think, in life. And so when I became a teacher, I specialized in art. And one of the things that we were trying to teach, and I guess unlearn as well with other teachers, was that art wasn't working towards a product. It was working through a process. It was experimentation. It was developing ideas. And it was focusing on actually teaching art in its purest sense, rather than teaching 30 children to paint Van Gogh's sunflowers. Like we've all seen those school displays where you've got 30 paintings. Oh, I just hit my lamp there. 30 paintings, all identical. And you just think, well, what's actually been learned from that process,
Yeah, actually, I in middle school initially took an art class, and I can only draw stick figures still to this day, but it was so much just like paint or draw this apple and things like that. And I understand learning techniques, and I was fine with techniques, but when we got to like the art section, it was so much just like a very rigorous, like do this, do that. And for me with ADHD and for wanting to like, I'm somebody who just likes to get in there and mess with things as well, and just like see what works and doesn't work, and not being able to do that ended up being driven towards like theatrical arts and things like that. But it wasn't until I was in university I took a sculpting class, and the sculpting class was really around like teaching us a material and a medium, and then instead of saying make this, the instruction in university is like, okay, play with the clay or play with the plaster, and it really freed me to like explore that. And I think what you're mentioning is really a great approach to art. And I think that's the problem, is like there's different ways to learn, but I think a lot of times, at least I come from the States, a lot of times our art education at a younger level, unless you're in like an art school, is based so much around like restricting freedoms that don't give people a chance to play. And I'm glad there's a lot of avenues for people outside of formal education also to kind of, like you mentioned yourself, just kind of drawing manga and going from there to develop your style.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's kind of something I try to encourage within housing as well, is that same attitude of you're not working towards just one end product. It's all about learning along the way. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear, because it's easy to, when you look at work that's amazing, to go, oh, mine's rubbish, mine's nowhere near as good. But that's just not the way that you learn and grow. The way to learn and grow is to kind of take on inspiration, and then apply it, use ideas, use methods, and then find your own way through that way.
I agree completely. And to loop it back to housing, I think that can be sometimes the intimidating part about art, is also kind of the intimidating part about housing. And what I think live streaming is very unique for and can help with is I think a lot of people go on Reddit or go on YouTube, see the most amazing builds and go, oh, I can't compete with that. How would I ever make that without being encouraged to just experiment and play? And I often see people in contests, as I divide my contests on skill level based on people's own proclaimed skill level. And often people are so much further than they think they are and can do so much more than they think they can, because just having the encouragement to play with the housing editor, play with the things, and then hear encouraging words and positive feedback from the community and from streamers and things like that, I think helps a lot. So I think a lot of what you're saying about art, I love that approach that you took as an art teacher and also taken in ESO, because I think it grows. Because I don't think anybody who is a top end houser who wins tons of housing contests and has the most amazing builds you've ever seen wants the housing community to feel restricted. I mean, anybody I know who does housing wants as many people trying it out as possible.
Oh, absolutely. And I think housing should be for everyone. I think we need to encourage that. And also that not everything has to be totally reinvented. You can decorate a cottage by placing a few furnishings the way that you'd like it for a character or for yourself. And that is housing. And people seem to think that it's lesser to decorate, but actually there's a real charm with decorating a space and making it feel lived in, for example, you know?
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. I think there's multiple ways to approach it. I think lived in housing is just as complex and exciting as people who completely reskin things or do amazing cobbles and amazing sculptures, which are also amazing. And you see a lot of top-end housing people do that, but you also see them do very lived in things, like meticulously placing an apple here, you know, a wood there, a crate there, because yeah, housing can also just be the amazing thing of looking at an empty space and just decorating it to like that lived in feel that is a house that you wish you could like go into in the real world.
Absolutely.
So love talking about housing, but I also want to just talk about your other kind of experiences as a streamer. You know, we talked about like what kind of led you to ESO, encouraged you to start streaming, your art background, teaching background, these things that, you know, you've applied to your stream. Something I'm curious about is what else you get up to. Let's start with ESO and then we'll branch into some of the other games and things you've been trying out. But like, obviously all of your streams are not just housing tours. You've done other things in ESO. So can you talk a little bit about your other like interests within Elder Scrolls Online, whether it's streamed or not streamed, and you know, what really appeals to you about the game?
I think one thing that really appeals to me is the questing system. It's the fact that it's a rare game. I'd never encountered a game, specifically an MMO, where every single character had voiced dialogue in a game before, and it was kind of mind-blowing, just the attention to detail that went into the questing. It was more than, hey, go kill 10 wolves, because we all know quests like that from certain games. And there was actual like character and personality. And one of the things I found really interesting was the fact that different characters have different perspectives on the same events, meaning that you have to kind of piece together what's actually happened from multiple perspectives, which is actually very much like what you do in real life.
Right. The Elder Scrolls world has that unique thing where lore and story is always told from the perspective of the person. I know you're new to, and you're just getting into, you did ESO, now you're getting into Skyrim. I'll talk a little bit more about getting into Skyrim. But for me, who's been doing Elder Scrolls games since Daggerfall and then Morrowind and Oblivion, as you go around regions, and even in ESO as you go around regions, you can start seeing like, if people mention the same event, they might refer to it differently, which gives it a very real feel. I've always felt Elder Scrolls as a world has a very real feel to it because people's perspectives, their cultural upbringings, their biases, you know, things like that very much affect how they view things. And I've always felt the lived in world adds a lot of flair and appeal to Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always been a bookworm. I've always been very engaged and interested by stories, especially stories that I feel like I get drawn into them, almost like I'm a part of them. And I think that's absolutely a facet of the questing system in ESO that I really enjoy, to put it simply.
Yeah, and it's really cool that it's evolved in that way, because yeah, I mean, obviously earlier MMOs were still learning the art form, but I think even if people didn't play World of Warcraft, a lot of people might be familiar with South Park or other pop culture references to killing a bunch of boars to level up and things like that. So I think there's a a lot of people have a cultural perspective of MMOs before they might try ESO or a different one, that it is a lot of like kind of boring, like, you know, big story moments interspersed with go kill 11 of this, where, like you said, it's not a lot of that. A lot of times side quests end up being unique side stories in their own right, especially since in ESO everything's voiced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one quest line that I'm sure many people have referred to that really kind of illuminated that for me was the alchemy quest line in Somerset. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Just the character development and story you got in that one little side quest. And I feel like there are a lot of people who could really relate to the character, could relate to the story. And it was a form of representation that I haven't really seen in video games before.
Right. And I think that's something that's also super wonderful about Elder Scrolls is representation. Whether it's something like the alchemy quest line that is a trans story, that is first and foremost in the story is telling a trans story, or if it's just something as simple as if you go to Fargrave and you talk to the characters, you'll find out that the innkeeper has a werewolf boyfriend, and it's just a queer relationship, a gay relationship, just normalized. And there's a lot of normalizing queer stories, normalizing like queer relationships in the game. So like you get amazing things like that amazing alchemy quest line that tells a very powerful story, a very poignant story, you know, a trans story. But you also just, in addition to that, not everything that is LGBTQIA plus in the game, not everything queer in the game is just, oh, it has to be they're queer, so it has to be the main focus. It's just, there's, you know, wives and boyfriends and polyamorous relationships and trans characters, and they're just part of the world, which is real to the world. And I think that level of representation, for me personally, as a non-binary person, as a queer person, makes me feel good, because not everything needs to be like a punch of a story. It's good to have those stories, but sometimes it's like, oh, look, my experience is normalized here in this world. And I think that's great.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. It's nice to just have it be a case that it's not like it's got to be an issue. It's just, it exists in the world, much like we exist in the real world. It exists in the universe within the Elder Scrolls, and it's not. I think one thing that they do really well is it's not tokenized.
Right.
It actually is kind of embedded within the culture, and it's just there. You know, it doesn't have to sing and dance the whole time to be there.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times the media, to exist, has to be this thing. And that's what I think is really, again, tremendous. It's great. The more representation in games that is just normalized, the better it is. And it's easier to connect with a game that normalizes my experience. At least, yes, in a very high fantasy way, but it's still, that's my experience. Oh, there it is in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
Kind of like turning, you know, kind of a little all over the place sometimes on the Kraken cast. That's where the Kraken cast, all the different tentacles. I wanted to kind of talk so about your you know, obviously use an avatar, which is VTubing's a big thing, avatar streams, like all that stuff is, you know, using a live camera, that's all a choice. I'm just kind of curious about the overall choice, if you don't mind talking about it, to use an avatar, and kind of like the development of your avatar as it represents you as a streamer, because I'm really fascinated. My partner's a VTuber, so I know there's a lot of thought that goes into being able to, like, I decorate my room, I do up my hair a certain way, obviously I represent myself that way. People who use avatars and VTube and things, like, they do that through their art. So I'm just kind of curious about those choices of how you chose to represent yourself through your art and the character you've developed come to be your avatar for streaming.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the reason I first thought to start with an avatar rather than with a camera was actually kind of twofold. One is that I, even in like just like a normal Skype call, I get very self-conscious about seeing my own face back. And what I find is that I'm not myself then. I'm not able to kind of express myself and communicate clearly. I'm just constantly focusing on like my micro expressions on the camera. So that was one reason. But the other reason was because of my background in education and potentially going back into education, I didn't want to go to work as a teacher and then have a child in my class say, "Oh, hey, I heard you say that rude word on the stream," you know. It was kind of it's to help keep that separation,
Right.
but also it meant that I could have total control and creativity over who my character was, who my avatar was.
Yeah, and I think that's really awesome. Like I said, there's no wrong way to stream. At the end of the day, everybody I've talked to on the podcast where we talk about it, at the end of the day, the right choices for your stream, from lighting to camera or no camera to this, that, or the other thing, comes down to what brings you the most comfort. It's when you start doing things that make you, like you mentioned, uncomfortable, that takes you out of it. If you're not the most comfortable, if you're not the most confident, then like you said, you're going to worry about like facial tics or facial expressions or things like this more than just providing the content you want. So I think that's wonderful. I think it's always great to make those choices that give you that, like, that level of like comfort and confidence. I think that is what makes streams more important than whether you use a camera or an avatar, a VTube rig, or anything in between. So why the centaur? Or there's probably a different mythological creature, but obviously similar to a centaur. Why the choice there? I'm just curious. Does that do with your level of like mythology and things like that, or how did you kind of come to this avatar you kind of settled on right now?
It's actually kind of multiple reasons. For one thing, I am a massive nerd when it comes to mythology and folklore. I love all these fantastical beasts, and I knew that I wanted my character to be something along the lines of like a faun or a centaur, just something a little bit more fantastical, you know? But on top of that, the whole idea kind of stemmed from the fact that I ramble a lot. I'm a total chatterbox. I was even called Mr. Chatterbox by my parents as a child. So because I talk a lot, you could kind of tag any of my rambles with TLDR, too long didn't read. And TLDR, Teal Deer, kind of became my mascot because I thought,
oh, that's clever.
What better than kind of slap it on the screen?
I never would have put those two together, but my love of puns and things now, that's awesome.
So yeah, that's what drove it pretty much.
Well, it's great. And like I said, for anybody out there who's thinking about getting into streaming and you're curious, should I use a camera? Or you might find sites that say you need to use a camera, it's more engaging. Just know that VTubers are popping off. People who use avatars are doing super well. Even if you look at like just the ESO category, both Nord and I stream, and some of the biggest streamers in that category, some use live cams. If you look at somebody like Ninja, right? But if you look at somebody like T, who also has a huge audience, uses an avatar. So like I said, I think what Nord says is really important. I just wanted to kind of say it again. It's like, what's going to give you the most comfort and confidence is always the way to go.
Absolutely. And T was actually one of the streamers that kind of showed me that I could actually stream using a 2D avatar or 2D VTuber, which I'm slowly working on. And you could still kind of produce high quality content, because T produces amazing quality content.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think, and the people sometimes do no cam streams as well, and those do really well. I do personally find, I think there is something, especially when you're initially starting out and growing, about having something people can identify with. But yeah, an avatar works just great for that. Just some representation, I think, always works well. So I love the teal deer. I love how it connects to TLDR. I also love that you were Mr. Ramble, because the thing about, or Mr. Chatterbox, because the thing about that's wonderful is some of the things, and I random direction to go in, but some of the things that when I was younger that were the things people would criticize me for, make fun of me for, or tease me about in a loving way, any of the ways you look at it, are some of the things I feel oddly make personally me a better streamer. Talking too much, my ADHD, being able to go between multiple things at once, my weirdness and a want to just do like things, spontaneously. All these like things that used to be like problems in school, and things that people are like, oh, you're so scatterbrained, of all of a sudden, or you talk too much, have suddenly become, or you over explain. All these things are now like traits that help my stream. And kind of along that same lines, you find that some of these things that, like, even if they were just kind of loving ribs, kind of like lend themselves to like streaming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find like one thing that, because I'm neurodivergent myself, and I found that I'd always get kind of hyper focused on particular topics. It could be anything. It could be French bulldogs. It could be World of Warcraft. It could be something very specific. And whereas when I was a child, it was kind of like, okay, that's enough. And in streaming, on Twitch, I've been able to actually kind of just share those parts of myself without a fear of worrying that it's too much. Because more often than not, I find there are other people out there who are also interested in that same thing, you know?
Yeah, I think twofold it comes back to things. One is representation, right? Finding if you have ADHD yourself, or if you're neurodivergent in some way, finding streamers who also are that way, that's great. Again, kind of like having representation in games, having representation on streams helps. Also, I think the great part about Twitch, with there being so many streamers with so many different styles and any game you could want, is if somebody pops into stream and they're like, this streamer's not for me, I don't like that they over explain things, or I don't like that they do this or that, they can pop to another stream. And then, I think that's great, because the people who do filter in, who identify with you, kind of start forming that community around those things that they like about you. So instead of having people say, this kind of doesn't fit in, or, oh, this is kind of strange, or, you talk too much, or whatever the case may be. Instead, you're like, the people who stick around are the people who like that you talk too much, that like that you are neurodivergent. And so you perceive the world in a different way and approach things in a different way, or love that you hyper focus on things. And I think that's so unique about Twitch, because the audience slowly builds around people that like that, they identify with that, or that's just things that they want from a stream they're watching. And that's great, because you, instead of having people go, this is not a negative, it's a bunch of people who are like, find it as a positive. So you kind of build up this kind of like family of people who all share in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also celebrating difference and diversity in terms of everything, like personality, background, the way that you see the world. I think Twitch is a great place in that you're pretty much guaranteed to find a streamer that you really connect with, that you really vibe with, and I think that's kind of wonderful,
Yeah, it's definitely a unique thing, and I do agree that's wonderful. Just to talk a little bit more about streaming before we kind of move on to another subject, I'm just kind of curious, because we all experience growth at differing rates. Sometimes we blow up quickly, sometimes it's a long, slow burn. Again, as something Reishi always says that I love to say as well, community, not competition. So not comparing ourselves against other people. You've had a really nice, steady kind of rise, early on, going from like 40, 50 average viewers, 70, like your average. And then you've been really kind of like really hitting stride here and going up again. I'm curious what that's been like, because obviously even with a really good, solid ascent in numbers, there's been times where you kind of plateaued and stabilized. I'm curious, as a streamer, because sometimes we don't want to, but we can judge ourselves on numbers. We can accidentally compare ourselves to someone else, or just be like, why aren't my numbers going up, or why did they dip? I'm just curious how you take care of your mental health when going through highs and lows, and plateaus and things like that, and kind of keep focused, because you've managed, in my opinion, to keep really focused in these months streaming on growing yourself in the organic direction you want to go in, deliver the content you want to deliver. But I know as a streamer on the back end, sometimes it can be difficult, because you start second guessing whether or not you should do this or that, because of like the numbers of it all.
Yeah, and I think you've absolutely hit a good point there, is because I'm an overthinker by nature. I've always been an overthinker. So that definitely does happen. But I think the best thing that's been for my mental health and for the community as a whole while I've been streaming is just, I'm not hyper focused on the numbers. I think more about the fact that there are genuine people who are showing up and connecting and engaging. And it's more about them as people than it is about numbers on a screen, because every single viewer, whether they're there for a little part of their day or for the whole stream, that is a real person spending their own time, and like probably the most valuable currency that we have, which is time. We have such a limited amount of it. You can't buy more of it. So I think I focus more on people than on the numbers, and that's been really helpful. But there have absolutely been times where, for example, say I've done a Sea of Thieves stream, or when I started doing Skyrim streams, where I was second guessing myself a little bit because of the numbers. But then I was thinking that when I did a Sea of Thieves stream, for example, I still had, I think, like 30 average, like solid people there for the whole of the Sea of Thieves segment. And that's incredible, because that means there were 30 people there who they were normally there for housing content. They were normally there for Elder Scrolls. And this was something that was such a different direction, but they were still there for the ride. And I think it's more about focusing on these people that have spent their time, you know?
Yeah, and I agree. I've ended every stream I've ever done, maybe barring one or two, since the dawn of streaming, with calling out at times the most valuable thing we have. So I'm definitely eye to eye with you on that. And I agree with you. It's about focusing on people. And whenever I do something and the numbers are down or numbers are up, but I'm very passionate about it, I try to look at, who's there. Because like, if I'm normally getting 100 and then I all of a sudden get 60, that's 60 people who are checking me out to do something else. Like you mentioned, that's amazing. It's just the way analytics on Twitch and even YouTube and things like that work is they're so counterintuitive, because what you're talking about is the things we, like you said, need to focus on. But I always like to talk about it because it's like kind of this thing that you feel even if you don't want to, where sometimes it's like a little like you have to push through it. I feel like I like this content. I think this content is good. I'm going to keep doing this, because if you don't stick with it, then it never has a chance to breathe or grow. It's like planting a new flower in your garden, and all of a sudden the flower doesn't bloom overnight. So it's like, well, I'm just going to pull the bulb out. It's always how I kind of likened it to. So I love that you have that mindset and that approach, because it can be difficult, especially someone like yourself whose numbers are cruising towards the partner numbers. That's when I feel like Twitch can sometimes, at least in my own personal experience and experience from a lot of friends of mine who've made it to partner or near partner, that's when Twitch's numbers can sometimes start to grind you and make you like extra second guess it. So I just wanted to talk about that, because I think it's one of those things that even if you don't want to focus on numbers, sometimes it can get the best of us.
Oh, absolutely. And I've definitely had those times where I've thought about it. But I kind of, because I was there to about, I guess, a month and a half, 2 months ago. We kind of recently technically hit that mark to be able to apply for partnership. But I decided that for my own mental health, I was going to focus on just trying to focus on kind of, I guess, growing my channel organically, and focusing on developing the kind of content that I want to put out there. And I've set like, I guess I've set like a goal, a personal goal myself in the background for, okay, at this point, I'll probably apply for partner. But I think a big part is that I'm not even really thinking about applying at the moment. I'm just going to kind of wait, see how things grow naturally. And then if one day we get to that kind of personally set goal, I'll go, okay, I might apply. But I don't want it to be like a driving factor.
That's really healthy, because yeah, a lot of people will get so lost in the push to affiliate, push to partner, push to this many followers, get too lost in that because of the numerical goal, and that becomes such a crux of the content. It puts a lot of pressure on the community, unfortunately, and then those are the people sometimes that when they hit that, because it's such a focused part of what they're doing, it's such a crux of the content, that they get a little bit lost after they hit it, because they're not focusing on the next. Because partner's a wonderful milestone, but ultimately it is a milestone. It's a check mark. The check mark does more to open doors with potential sponsors than anything about the content you produce. Because your numbers, in my opinion, don't dictate. You're not making better content when 100 people are there versus when 20 people are there. And I think it's really good that you've managed to keep that kind of grounded approach to content, where the focus is on the content, it's on the community, and it's on organic growth, because that's, I think, what gives a channel longevity versus struggling maybe with like a burnout along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will say that I was also incredibly lucky at the beginning, because I'd already kind of, I mean, I was on Twitch a lot in the space of a few months. Around kind of June, July, August, I was in a lot of streams. I kind of had Twitch open most of the day while I was working on various things. Mm-hmm. And so I already kind of got to know people. I built relationships within the community before I started streaming, meaning that I was fortunate enough on my first day of streaming to already have a number of people there for the entire stream. And I think that's made things a lot easier, I think, in the sense that I didn't start from say 0 to 1, 2, 3 average viewers, because it can be difficult just starting. I think a lot of people, when they start, probably have an issue with talking. How do I keep talking when there's potentially no one there? And so that was a mindset I was very aware of from the beginning. So I turned off the viewer numbers and I was like, I don't care how many people are in there. I'm going to talk to them the same way, regardless of whether there's 5 people or 500 people in there. And that's generally helped me, but I was very lucky at the beginning.
Yeah, honestly, what you're describing is a prime example of networking, or true peer-to-peer networking, which is getting to know people, being parts of communities, forging relationships with no expectations from that. But again, because you were part of a lot of communities, because you forged relationships, there was a lot of extra, like, people knew your name. So the first time you went live, they're like, oh, they already knew who you were. And I think there's a lot to be said there, because there's a lot of people who don't understand networking, either think it's a bad word or think it means like just self-promoting the heck out of yourself without getting to know people. But being organically part of communities, those communities get to know you and they want to see you succeed. So I think that's a super good example of where networking can kind of work out. And something I always say about luck is luck happens. You can get a huge raid. All sorts of different things can happen. Like, you could right game, right time, but true luck, like, luck is like winning the lottery, but that doesn't mean anything if you can't capitalize on it. And I think the reason you were able to, like, you say you got lucky, but I think you had a lot of people come at first, but if you hadn't forged those relationships, if you hadn't genuinely be part of communities, if you hadn't like had all those things before you started streaming, you might have had a lot of people watch you but not stick around. I think it kind of undersells you as a streamer and a person to say, I was really lucky. Yes, very fortunate. But again, getting the eyes there is like, that might be partially luck. But I think what actually is more your own hard work, even if it was intuitive hard work, in genuinely becoming parts of these communities and getting to know people on a genuine level. So those people already knew who you were, wanted to see you succeed. So I think that says more to your character and who you are as a community member and as the head of a community now yourself than any luck, really.
Thank you. Yeah, I I have a bad habit of undermining myself. I get told off by our collective friend Ash for it a lot.
Oh, I do. I say things like that because I also do that thing. Every time my numbers spike, I'm like, man, I just got lucky there. Like, no. I have a hard time unless it's pointed out to me. So I like to point that out to other content creators, because I sometimes hearing it from multiple people can help you realize like the level of work you put in, because it's very easy. I think not everybody's like that, but I've noticed a lot of streamers seem to be the self-defacing type of people who want to like undermine their own hard work and achievements and kind of undersell themselves.
Yeah, I think I guess it's probably a very also a very very British thing. I've always been someone who'll say sorry far too often, and then I end up someone will tell me off for saying sorry, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry for saying sorry. So it's just a part of my personality, I guess.
That's awesome, though. No, it's what makes you. But I think that's really good, because everybody has different entrance points. Some people, like I said, enter having no community and they have to build that from scratch, and some people have that community. So that's really good. It mirrors a lot of you're very different people, but both amazing, wholesome people. Kind of mirrors a lot of when I had Maddie Gon on the show. Maddie Gon had kind of said the same thing. Had spent a lot of time in the community. People had encouraged him to stream, so he kind of was able to start with that kind of backing. And I think not everyone who's going to stream can do that, but if you're fortunate enough to be part of a community and already have that, it can be a nice little surge at the start, a little kind of like support pillow to help you out at that beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're right in the sense that there are times when, for example, I could have a stream and it's going really well, and then there's no one that talks for a while, and we all have to have like lulls in conversation. And I think the thing is, it's not on the chat to keep the conversation going. I think something that's really helped is finding ways to keep the conversation going, even if nobody's necessarily typing in chat. And one of my go-tos there is kind of bringing up stories. I think personal anecdotes are fantastic, because more often than not, people are listening to you in the background while they're doing something else. And it's a way to kind of bring them in without them necessarily feeling that they have to chat, to engage. As much as it's wonderful to be able to engage with people in chat, it's good to have those moments where you can share a part of yourself, whether or not someone is kind of chatting, you know?
Yeah, no, and I agree completely. When chat is popping, it's easy content, right? Chat becomes part of the content, becomes part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
It's easy, but it can be hard. I did start with a very small number and built up from there. So one of my fortunate things is a lot of my first months of streaming were talking to absolutely what seemed to be no one, but ended up not being anyone. Because I think what you said there is really important. A huge percentage of the people who watch you, if you look at your active chatters versus active viewers, if you start looking at your metrics, a huge percentage of people who watch will lurk. Maybe they have you in a second tab or a third tab. Maybe you're their main tab, but they're working. Maybe they're playing ESO themselves and they just like your voice. They like to hear what you have to say. You know, there's certain streamers who are cracked, right? They're just so good at the gameplay. Doesn't matter what they do. People are just kind of tuning because they want to see top end gameplay. But for most people, what people will say why they stick around is, you know, I'm there for you. I like your personality. Maybe they won't watch you do other games. Maybe they will. But at the end of the day, it's your personality. It's those anecdotes, like you said, it's those stories. It's, you know, how you are when they're lurking that really kind of, I think, connects people, because there is, with streaming more than any other form of content, that direct connection. So I think that's also really important. And I'm glad you kind of said that, is there is lulls, and it's important to not just like assume because there's a lull no one's watching or no one's listening. Because I've told full stories, had nobody engage in chat when I was doing a particularly long stream, and then 2 streams later I mentioned something and somebody brought up something I said when I was telling a story when chat was not moving at all, which tells me, oh yeah, sometimes people are just listening. They're just there to listen, and that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing, I heard a piece of advice because I was watching videos before I started streaming just to try to make sure I was kind of as prepared as possible. And one of the best pieces of advice there was, even if there's no one in the channel live, the person you're talking to is anyone who might be catching the VOD. You have to talk to the people who maybe aren't even there live, but are there watching after you're done.
Yeah, there's an actual statistic that you basically have between 5 and 8 seconds to grab someone's attention.
Yeah.
So yeah, even if they're watching the VOD, or if they just pop in. Sometimes someone pops in. I'm a prolific lurker. I lurk a lot. They get into the channel, and 5, 10, 15 seconds go by and there's nothing, they'll probably pop out. So yeah, between never knowing when someone's actually stopping into your channel or watching the VOD, yeah, it's important, because at the end of the day, yeah, people listen to it like it's a radio show. Some people actively engage. Sometimes you're saying something, somebody go, oh, that's something I want, to talk about. So it's, I think it's really, really good. I'm glad that you have a really solid foundation. I think that obviously is something that anybody listening to this or watching it, whatever, can attest, or anybody who's watched you live before, is you have a really good kind of sense. Maybe that comes from your teaching background or things like that, but a very good sense for maintaining a conversation and an audience, regardless of, again, if chat is speaking or not speaking, and also just treating every minute of your content the same. Like you mentioned those things, but sometimes those are bullet points people say and they try to achieve, but I think you do a really good job of actually actively achieving those.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my aim, I guess. And it's funny that you brought up that some people listen like it's a radio show. That's actually the best way I managed to explain what Twitch was to my mother. She didn't understand it at all, still doesn't fully understand. But she understood it more when I said, essentially, it's like listening to a podcast, listening to a radio show, but where if you have a question, you can just pop it in and get an answer instantly. You don't have to send in a message by text. You can just kind of enjoy it and dip in and out of the conversation with no kind of social responsibility, social expectation. You could be part of the conversation for 5 minutes and then disappear for a bit. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that on Twitch. I think it's kind of unique in that sense.
Yeah, I have ADHD and I could not watch 4 YouTube videos at once, but I usually have 3 to 4 tabs up, and I'm actively, passively in all of them. And what I mean by that is I'll pop into someone's chat for like 20 minutes. I'll hang out. I'll pop over and see what someone else is doing. Not because the person doesn't interest me, just because the way my ADHD works, sometimes I want to filter between them. I also, thanks to my ADHD, do have the unique ability to listen to things at different volumes and be able to actually hear all three. So sometimes I'll just float around like that. And that's very uniquely Twitch. The ability to like watch you for like 45 minutes, engage with chat, just lurk for a bit longer. And then over, maybe on Medic stream or somebody else who's streaming, pop over there for a bit. And I love that about Twitch. I love the ability to honestly, personally, over the course of hours, not have to dedicate myself to one thing, but filter between three people I really love's streams and chats and things like that.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I do the exact same thing, where I'll normally have 2 tabs up, sometimes 3. It depends on how my focus is that day. But generally, I'll always pop up 2 streams and I'll have them at different volumes. But also another thing that I need is they have to be different pitches of voice. Yeah, so I'll often listen, I'll have one person with a higher pitched voice and one person with a lower pitched voice. And that way I can kind of listen and pay attention to both of them without them competing.
Awesome. Yeah. For me, I can do that with volumes, but I can see how pitches work too. But I think it's a really, really great thing. So I want to talk a little bit. We talked a lot about ESO, about streaming and things like that. These are amazing things. And we touched on it a little bit, but we were focused on art and stuff. So I want to go to like branching into other games, obviously. So 440 hours streamed ESO, but you also have recently, you've done about 28 hours of Skyrim, then 10 hours of Sea of Thieves, you've done 8 hours of art. So there's a few other things that you've started to mix in, and I'm just curious how that's kind of made you feel, like not just doing different content, but also how branching out, touching different content, having streams where you're not having to do ESO might, if it's had a positive impact on your ESO streams.
I personally think it has, in the sense that I started experiencing like a burnout on ESO back in, honestly, not that long after I started streaming. Not that long after I started streaming, there were so many events in that kind of October, November periods.
Oh yeah, Event Mageddon.
We had exactly, and I'd been playing so much for so long that I needed a break from ESO to be able to enjoy it more. And I think that dipping into other games, dipping into other content has massively helped with that, because it means that I can enjoy it without feeling like I have to do this and nothing else, or I won't succeed. Because I think that's another thing, is this fear of failure if you don't stick in the same game all the time. I don't know if I'd ever become like a true variety streamer. I think I'd probably always have one main game, but I like the freedom of being able to say, if there's a new game coming out, like there's this one game called Small Lands, which looks amazing. Being able to go, actually,
looking. Sorry, it looks fantastic.
I am so excited. And I'd like to stream that. I'd like to be able to stream that. And so being able to do, so for example, Mondays are currently my variety day. It gives me that little breath of fresh air that I think is healthy to have within streaming.
I agree. My big fault was, so I didn't mean to partner push, but I ended up partner pushing when I was close to partner numbers. Like, I was just going hard on ESO, going hard on the events and things like that. And then it became too much of a habit. So I didn't stick with ESO because I was worried about my numbers going down. And I didn't stop doing marbles or stop doing these other things because I was worried about my numbers. I had just done exclusive ESO, so it was hard for me to break my focus and branch out. And it wasn't until I made myself branch back into other things, restart the podcast for season 3, do some Elden Ring, do some Lost Ark. In fact, I took a month where I basically did almost no ESO other than maybe once a week. And my love of ESO, to stream it, to create content for it, and my brain is back to like actually coming up with unique ideas, where it had become for me, and I don't know if it was similar to you, it wasn't just burnout. It became like punching in at a 9 to 5, punch in, do this, do that in ESO. Maybe I had a housing contest,
absolutely.
But I'm just punching the clock, and that doesn't, I always say there's sliders, like there's the, and one of them is the creativity slider. And when you're not, for me at least, when I'm not being creative, and I'm not, every stream is going to be a unique event stream, but if I'm not working towards those, I start feeling this like what am I doing? So yeah, just doing other stuff. I felt the same way. It rejuvenated me for my ESO content despite doing other content. So it's kind of cool to hear that, not the exact same, but kind of similar to you, branching out on Mondays and stuff, helps stave off that burnout and let you like do unique and different content.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just helped to I don't want to constantly pigeonhole myself. I think because I do something, I think it's been helpful that I do something very niche within kind of a niche category, but I don't want to pigeon myself into thinking that's all I can do now. That's it, full stop. Like I can never do something else. I think it's been really helpful to kind of break out of that. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons I'm not doing the whole partner. I'm not thinking of the partner badge or anything like that, because I'm aware that on those days I will have lower numbers, but that's okay because I'm enjoying myself. And I think that comes through on streams, and it helps with building a community around you as a streamer rather than just being about the game itself, I
agree completely. I think it was easy for people in the community to tell the days, even if the numbers were good, where I was a bit more tired. Like I get comments like, you look tired. I do my makeup and everything. I don't think I looked any more tired than I normally do. I think what they meant when I looked tired is I think they could hear it in how I was approaching content. I think the tired, I don't think was my eyes had bigger bags or I was yawning. I think the tired was, I was tired of the content that was coming through. And the only way people in the community could express is like, you seem a little more agitated. You seem a little more tired and things like that. And I think I was just tired of feeling pigeonholed. And the worst part is I had pigeonholed myself, like you mentioned. Like, and I think it's that I love to hear streamers who have like already have that kind of insight of like, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. I want to make sure I'm leaving myself freedoms to do these things. And I think the other thing that's important that I like to bring up is when you only do one game, you live and die with that game. If you look at my numbers on the months where I'm doing exclusively ESO, you know what? Everybody, anybody in the ESO category there who talked about, some people even tweeted about it, numbers were down in certain months because as the people kind of got burnt out after the events, the whole community was down, so numbers were down. And then when the game's popping off because of an event, numbers are up, and then yeah, you're connected. So if something, God forbid, I don't want to happen to ESO, but something happens like with World of Warcraft where there's a massive scandal, all of a sudden you're inextricably always tied only to that game. So I think there's a certain level of also needing to like create, like you said, create that community and create doing other things so people are there for the whole experience and the content you're creating and not just only the game of it all. Because yeah, games come and go, and when you look at this on a long-term scale, it's important to be able to branch out if you want to.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
I do want to ask though about Skyrim. It's your first playthrough. I think
yes.
The game's been out for a decade now. So if people think, I know they keep re-releasing Skyrim, re-pushing Skyrim, re-releasing Skyrim to the point that it's a meme, but obviously there's still new people playing it. But I'm curious, I want your take. You're 28 hours in, no backseating, no spoilers. You're just experiencing Skyrim. You have minimal add-ons, visual effects, some of the basic add-ons that make the game a little more visually appealing and things like that. But for the most part, it's not like this 2000 mod experience. So I'm curious how 30 hours in, your opinion of Skyrim a decade later.
I am loving it. Honestly, I'm obsessed. It's funny because I've had friends trying to persuade me to play Skyrim for those full 10 years. My youngest brother, he was obsessed with Skyrim when it came out. And I don't know why I didn't feel the draw towards it before, but diving into it, I found there's a lot left in it. And I feel super lucky to be able to experience it for the first time in this day and age and not have a bunch of things spoiled. Because while there's the meme of the opening scene, right, that everyone's seen 1,000 times, but outside of that, I've not really seen that much in terms of spoilers for Skyrim. So I'm getting to truly experience it for the first time, and it's brilliant.
Awesome. I'm glad. I love the game. So it's very rare to be able to see someone's first true first experience with it. So it's been, when I've been able to catch those streams, they've been a pleasure. And I don't have time to go through and watch whole VODs, but it's one of the few VODs I'll skip around to certain parts that you're doing to see what your reaction was to this moment or that moment, because it's cool. It's like I said, I watch a decent amount of Skyrim streamers, but most of the ones I watch are people like, there's a streamer named Meiji, 2,400 mods, hardest difficulty, permadeath, like the most like mod, like, and a lot of the Skyrim on Twitch that I watch is this heavily modded community, so it's very rare to see like people's like 10 years later first taste with it.
Yeah, and see. One issue that I'm having though is that I now feel like I can't play it off stream, and I keep wanting to. I'm literally obsessed with this game, so I find myself wanting to do quests, wanting to play it in my free time, and then I go, I can't. I've got my first playthrough on stream.
What you just mentioned is me and Elden Ring. I have been craving, salivating to move on in Elden Ring, but I played so much of it on stream that it's got to wait. So I know that feeling. Because sometimes I sit down like, I want to play some no, I'm doing this on stream. People want to see my journey. I need to save myself, but it's tempting to play it off stream. So different games, but I feel that pull. Speaking of off streams, I don't know how much of a gamer you are off stream, if you do all of your gaming on stream, but if you do game off stream, I'm curious what games, or if you don't do gaming, what kind of hobbies that you get into, stuff that you're not able to like do on stream, or things that you keep off stream because they're for you, like, and things that you keep for yourself.
So, I mean, I play a bunch of games, but I've very much always been a casual gamer. I play as much as I feel like, and then I'll just put it down. And I could play a game for a couple of hours and put it down for 2 months and then pick it up again. That's just the way that I work with games. But I've been very into Sea of Thieves in particular. That's become a great way to kind of de-stress and unwind off stream, because it's sheer chaos. And I can just game. Exactly. You can just kind of dive in with your friends and not worry about anything else, because there's always something happening. But aside from gaming, I think mostly it's just I do a lot of reading. I spend a lot of time reading stories. One day I hope to retire to a home that's filled with bookshelves across every wall.
Speaking of bookshelves, I actually tried to scour the internet for the random background photo I use, so everybody knows. I tried to find the background photo to put Nord's avatar on that I felt fit him, and that's why I found one that had just a tremendous amount of like books and curiosities on it.
Yeah, honestly, you hit the nail on the head. I would happily live in that study.
Yeah, I tried to picture like if you weren't using an avatar and you were live, what do I picture behind you? And that's just kind of what I picture, is a desk and books and things. So
I like to joke around that if I had to live in another universe, I would be a hobbit. just in my little hobbit hole, surrounded by books and the fire, with a little pumpkin patch. So it's very much that's my whole vibe. That's what I aspire to.
Amazing. I love it. All right, so we talked a lot about a lot of things I like to talk about, pigeonholing and mental health, and your philosophy on streaming and things like that. Since this podcast is coming out, PTS reveals and stuff just went live. You know, we both do a lot of ESO here. I feel like it's a good opportunity to ask you your opinion on ESO and High Isle, new things coming, things that have you excited about it or maybe not so excited about it. I'm just kind of curious your kind of current sentiments as we kind of head towards High Isle.
I'm honestly really looking forward to it. My favorite chapter, and I wasn't even playing when this chapter came out. I only started playing ESO last year in February, March. So I wasn't even here when it came out. But Somerset's my favorite aesthetically, visually. And I think Blackwood was amazing. I think Greymoor was fantastic. But it's been a lot of more kind of doomy, gloomy scenarios. You know, it's been very end of the world. it's been a much darker in theme, and I think High Isle is going to be the breath of fresh air that we need. I mean, just that field of sunflowers brought me more joy than I can possibly explain. And I'm not going to spoil anything too much, but there's this village called Stonelaw Grove in High Isle. It's amazing, and I want to live there. And so I'm super excited because this feels like the breath of fresh air that we've needed for a little while now.
I feel like story choices for the chapter, they went in a lot of directions I was also looking forward to. One, seeing Fargrave in the Deadlands was amazing, and going back and having the nostalgia. I mean, they said it in the reveal, having the nostalgia kick of Oblivion, having the nostalgia kick of those of us who played Skyrim was great, and the beautiful underground, like Blackreach caves and stuff. But yeah, having another beautiful zone, a dangerous but beautiful zone, kind of like Somerset is amazing. And I also really like it's been a long time since it hasn't been the end of the world. Maybe a small DLC like Murkmire wasn't the end of the world, but everything else is like Morrowind into Clockwork into Somerset, Nocturnal and Mephala and Clavicus Vile's plot to destroy the world. Dagon's going to destroy the world. Dragons are going to destroy the world. It's been honestly since Orsinium where it's been more localized in terms of the plot, because Orsinium is, progress versus tradition, different takes on religion, and, doing the right thing, but, becoming a villain for doing it. There's all these more localized stories. So I'm really happy to have the Ascendant Order, and I haven't played with the story at all. I always wait till after PTS when the game's actually live to do it. But so far from the prologue and from the dungeons, it's really nice to like kind of have that feel of a less like extra planier massive threat to the world, and actually have this more localized threat again, where we can get a little more into the politics of the Bretons and the Druids on High Isle and the prison island and all these things.
And it's the politics that I'm looking forward to. I find the politics-driven stories really engaging. And I have to admit that for newer players, I feel like I can call myself a newer player because I only started last year. Mm-hmm. I didn't find the Bretons very interesting when I first was playing the game.
There's not much. There's not much lore to them. There's not much in ESO or any of this single games. So yeah. Yeah.
So to me, the Bretons, I didn't know their rich laws. So to me, I just considered them, to be blunt, the Englishmen. That's what I was very much picking them at. Like the Englishmen, they were just kind of the stereotypical human. And yet I've learned since playing that there's so much more to them and their history and their background. And I think High Isle will allow for a kind of depth of understanding of the Bretons that's been there for a lot of races that just hasn't been there for the Bretons in ESO.
I hated orcs in Daggerfall, hated orcs in Morrowind, hated them in Oblivion. Didn't care about the orcs, did not care about the Orsimer. Cool backstory, I like the stuff about Malakath, I like the lore bits of it, but whatever. And then Orsinium came out in ESO, and I was entrenched in the honor bound and the steep tradition and progress and all these things of Hrothgar, and now I love the Orsimer. Argonians were a race I never really played in the single player games. We got a little bit of them in Morrowind. They were kind of slaves to the Dumber, but we didn't really get into them. But then we get like Murkmire and Blackwood and elsewhere. So all these like stories and this lore ESO is able to flesh out, I think is amazing. So yeah, being able to ingrain ourselves with the Bretons will give me a new appreciation. Plus it's lore that we really don't get from the standalone games, which I think is tremendous too. So
yeah, absolutely. It's giving us a more fully realized understanding of their culture, of who they are, how everything functions within a society, and I think there's something really engaging with that. But another thing with High Isle that I have to talk about is the architecture. I'm a massive nerd when it comes to architecture. I almost went to university to study architecture.
Sorry to interrupt, but have you got on? Well, I mean, you were also on the alpha build. Have you been on PTS? Have you looked at the house, the one we'll be able to get with gold, once we get the like questing achievement yet?
So I haven't been on PTS, but I did go on the preview when that was available. And And so I don't know if has it been confirmed that you can buy high hallow hold with gold?
Let me go ahead and do my standard disclaimer. There's been no confirmation that you can buy high hallow hold with gold. However, if we look historically at chapters, there is a free inn room and there is a house that you can buy with crowns, but you can also buy with gold when you complete the questing achievement. This has been true from Morrowind on. So I am projecting, just like they didn't confirm that that was going to be the case with the house in Leyawiin until the game came out. I am assuming because of the past that this is true. However, there is zero confirmation. I could be off my rocker. However, historically speaking, I think that is the case because it matches up with previous PTSs and previous chapters in terms of the house that you can get with gold, minus Elsewhere, which had the very unique situation with the Lunar Hall.
Yeah, and I suspect it probably will be one that we can get with gold. I'm hoping it's one that we can get with gold because
disclaimer is important because they didn't confirm it. That is a hopeful assumption.
Clarify that. Yeah, before I dived in, but I love it because to me it's a very versatile home, and not in the sense of, say, Moonsugar Meadow, where there we've been given like a huge open space to do whatever we want. What's different here is it's versatile in the sense that I think you can configure the rooms in that building however you want to. It's easy to block sections off. It's easy to add walls and create rooms. And the views are fantastic.
It's also, the rooms are big, but also not so big that you could technically, depending on how dense you wanted to decorate, you could technically, I was kind of going through it, decorate that whole house and have it still look really good. If you didn't want to block sections off. But what I love about it, you mentioned architecture. I'm going to let you get back to that. But you mentioned architecture, so it reminded me of the home in Leyawiin has that really, I keep forgetting, the name is escaping me, has that really unique architecture where it's two separate buildings connected with a bridge. And this one has an even more unique architecture because like it's got multiple floors and views and Widow's Walks and stuff. So you mentioned architecture and made me think this house has one of the more unique interior architectures I think I've seen.
Absolutely, and what I love is the fact that I'd say it's mostly an interior home in terms of the use of space.
Oh yeah, just a tiny courtyard.
Exactly. There's a small courtyard. I do wonder how much buildable space there is beyond the wall. I'm curious to see when someone plays around with that. But you can actually appreciate the architecture from that courtyard. And one thing I think that's really charming about it is the fact that you get this little alcove where you can actually peek at the street just outside. It just gives you this little glimpse into the world, and it helps it feel more like it's embedded in the place.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'm super excited.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, as somebody who was going to go into architecture, obviously the architecture of the Breton's architecture in High Isle is gorgeous. It's very Mediterranean. Yeah, it's very Mediterranean. It's the right blend of historical, medieval, Renaissance-y, almost Renaissance, not quite Renaissance, but medieval architecture with the right fantasy gloss of paint on it. Yeah,
absolutely. And even just like, so I'm a huge fan of exposed beamwork. In the UK, we have something called the Tudor style, and it's a lot of exposed beams, and it's one of my favorite styles when it comes to homes and listed buildings. But it's also little details in the home. Like I love this kind of, I don't know what to call it, like a dove blue, like an azure paint that they've used on every single like window frame and the external doorway, because it just adds, it just adds so much more character to the home, I think.
So I made every buildable furnishing that you can make on the PTS to look at all the ones we can build. And one of my favorite pieces of new furnishing is actually the decorative benches and stools that have that tealish, that light blue cushioning on them, plus the ornate woodwork. I love the furnishings in this because it's kind of like when Somerset came out, whereas it's Breton, but it's elevated Breton. Just like Somerset was like that Alinor, that Aradon, that style furnishing, but it was elevated. This is like the elevated version of Breton furnishing. Also, a lot of it has octopuses on it, and so it has a 4-poster bed with an octopus design on it. So that's for me.
I think they had a target audience there.
I also love it because it will work really well with the existing Breton furnishings if you use those. It will also blend really well with the Leyawiin furnishings because of the nautical theme, but it can also tie into so much. I think I could gush about the furnishing. I want to make sure we can have a little more time, but yeah, I'm excited about the housing and architecture. Always am excited about the zone. I'm very much a quest and lore player, and then housing fashion player. So that's all looking top notch.
It's fantastic. And I think they've been really smart in the way they're now creating furnishings that can fit with multiple other styles, because they're realizing people aren't going to stick to just one style when they're building.
Right.
Like the Fargrave furnishings, they fit in brilliantly with Redguard furnishings, or elsewhere furnishings. And I think it's really clever the way they're introducing those sorts of styles now.
Yeah, and a lot of it elevates but works with previous styles. I think it's tremendous, and I love it so very much. And again, something I like, and I know I don't want to get onto a contentious point because it's contentious with some people. I do like the focus on horizontal systems because we get a new zone, so we get everything that comes with that: new trial, new public dungeons, new major quest line, new events, all the lore. We also, antiquities hasn't gone anywhere, new antiquities. Companions haven't gone anywhere, new companions. They've added a card game, which, love it or hate it, it is a new system for people who are going to enjoy it, that ESO's proven to keep expanding on systems. So it's pretty exciting to me because I feel like we got everything we got with last launch plus more. Again, I don't want to get onto the contentious topic because I know there is some headbutting right now about the card game with some people and it taking away from other things. But for me, I'm just excited that ESO never abandons things. They still focus on furnishing, they still focus on housing, they still focus on companions and antiquities and all these things they've added without taking other elements out of like the quests and the public dungeons and trials and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are definitely games out there that feel like they'll introduce a new system with every chapter, with every expansion, and then the old systems just kind of fall into disrepair to be nothing. And I think I like the fact that in ESO everything stays very true to how it was when it first came out. Right. You know, you can go and explore Somerset and experience it the same way that you would have experienced it when it came out for the first time.
Right. And if you have antiquities, there's antiquities now back in Somerset that weren't there before. Like they add to existing content. It's very symbiotic. The term you're looking for is parasitic content, and World of Warcraft, sadly, I don't like to call out games, is very bad about parasitic content. They'll often introduce systems for one release that by the next release are never touched again. So
exactly, that was actually the game I was referring to, because like that you work towards something in this game in a particular chapter, and then the next expansion comes along and suddenly something you've worked hard on, maybe you've invested a lot of hours into, is just nothing, and they say, look here, now you have to go for this thing. That thing's useless now, you don't need that anymore.
Yeah, and what I love about it is since they do it to the older zones, it just adds. So if you get Greymoor and you have antiquities, all of a sudden every zone that's existed before all of a sudden has antiquities I can dig up, and everything they'll release in the future will probably have antiquities. So not only does it continue past that expansion, they take it backwards through previous expansions, or in the case of companions, your companions are summonable not just in Blackwood but any zone and stuff. So I love that about it. So so before we get to Q&A section, and for anybody listening to this on Spotify or watching this on YouTube, the Q&A will be a separate video release. I do have a couple rapid fire questions, kind of like a palate cleanser before we get to the Q&A. I like to ask.
Sure thing.
So first things first, I have to ask, is a Pop-Tart a ravioli?
I wouldn't call it a ravioli, but then it's funny. I feel like it surprises people. I'm a little more purist in this sense. Like, to me, for example, if a pizza doesn't have both sauce and cheese, I don't consider it a pizza.
Same.
So, yeah.
One of the few things that makes a pizza, right? But
yeah, exactly. So, not in my opinion, but I fully respect that other people have a different opinion.
All right. I'm going to give you, if you're familiar with it, there's a game called Kill, Marry, Bang, where you have to pick one of the characters. I'm going to give you, they're gone forever. And I'm going to give you my current conundrum. So in a situation where you had to kill one, marry one, and bang one, Darian, Jakarn, Razumdar.
Oh, that is a mean question.
It slipped into my brain after stream yesterday, and I've tormented myself on it. So I am spreading my pain.
Okay. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for my choices though. I'd probably kill Jakarn. Bang Razumdar and marry Darian.
Fair. It's very fair. I feel like it'd be unfair for me not to answer it. It's just a slight flip for me. But I'm gonna kill Darian. Sorry, Darian lovers. I know his shirtless push-ups are everything in Somerset, but unfortunately, if I have to choose one, he's gone. And I feel like Roz has a great personality, but I don't feel like it would be good to be hitched to. So we're just gonna have a fun fling in High Isle, and then we'll have a polyamorous relationship because I can't hold my boy Jakarn down, but we'll marry though. It's the Steve Bloom voice though. I grew up on Cowboy Bebop and Spike Spiegel, so like he gets away with it. He can say whatever sleazy thing he wants, but it comes out in that sultry Steve Bloom voice. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I get it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And sorry, not to diverge too much, but the voice acting, the quality of the voice actors they've got in ESO is absolutely amazing. And so some of my favorite characters are my favorite characters because of their voice actors, because of the way everything's delivered.
With that, can you please let people know where they can find you on Twitch, on social media, anything cool you have planned or coming up, or just what you're about? Just shout, rolling out the red carpet here, shout yourself out and shout out what you got coming up.
Sure thing. I mean, okay, so you can find me on Twitch, just Nordenheim, as you can see on the screen, or you can find me on Twitter. It's just Nordenheim1. Unfortunately, someone else got Nordenheim before I did. In terms of things coming up, I haven't got anything specific scheduled, but we did just have a subathon, so there will be some very interesting streams coming up in the next month or so. We're going to do a maid stream, we're going to do a hot tub stream, and we're going to do an after dark stream. So yeah, keep posted for dates there.
Wonderful. And again, for anybody watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify, you'll find links to not only Nordenheim's Twitch channel, but all of the social medias and things in the description.
Thank you for having me.